The coffee shop that changed my life. 3 years ago, if someone had asked me whether I was happy, I would have answered, of course. I had a good job, I earned enough money, I lived in a comfortable apartment in the city. Every month, my salary arrived on time. From the outside, my life looked perfect. But sometimes, the most ordinary lives hide the deepest loneliness. Every morning, my alarm rang at exactly 6:30. I got out of bed without thinking. I brushed my teeth, took a quick shower, put on the same dark blue suit, and left my apartment with a cup of coffee in my hand. I always walked the same streets. I always caught the same bus. I always sat in the same seat. Even the driver knew my face. He smiled every morning. I smiled back. Neither of us ever said a word. My office was on the 15th floor of a tall glass building. The view from my window was beautiful. I could see the river, the bridge, and almost the entire city. But I was always too busy to enjoy it. My days were filled with emails, meetings, reports, and phone calls. Every evening, I left the office feeling tired. Not because I worked too hard, but because every day felt exactly the same. One Friday afternoon, while everyone was getting ready for the weekend, my manager asked me to come into his office. He closed the door behind me. His smile disappeared. He looked nervous. "I wish I had better news," he said quietly. My stomach tightened. "The company is making some difficult changes." I didn't say anything. "We have to let several employees go." There was a long silence. Then he looked directly into my eyes. "I'm sorry. Your position has been eliminated." For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything. His lips were moving. He kept talking about paperwork, final payments, and future opportunities. But my mind had already gone somewhere else. 10 years. I had given 10 years of my life to that company. I worked late. I missed birthdays. I canceled vacations. I believed loyalty would always be rewarded. I was wrong. An hour later, I walked out of the building carrying a small cardboard box. Inside it were a family photo, a notebook, a coffee mug, and a little plant that someone had given me years before. It suddenly felt much heavier than it looked. Outside, people were laughing. Cars filled the streets. Life continued as if nothing had happened. But for me, everything had changed. I started walking without knowing where I was going. I ignored the bus stop. I ignored my phone. Friends were sending messages. My sister called twice. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. After almost an hour, dark clouds covered the sky. A cold wind began to blow. Then the rain started. At first, it was only a few drops. A minute later, it was pouring. I looked around, searching for somewhere to stay dry. That's when I noticed a small coffee shop at the corner of an old street. It looked different from the modern cafes I usually visited. The building was old. The windows were large. Warm yellow lights shone through the glass. There were flowers on the windowsills. A small wooden sign above the door simply read, "Emma's Coffee." No fancy logo, no advertisements, no loud music. Just a quiet little coffee shop. For some reason, it felt welcoming. I pushed the door open. A tiny bell above the entrance rang softly. The smell of freshly baked bread and roasted coffee beans filled the room. It was warm inside. Soft piano music played in the background. Several people were reading books. An elderly man was solving a crossword puzzle. Two college students were laughing over something on a laptop. Near the fireplace, a young mother was reading a storybook to her little daughter. Nobody looked stressed. Nobody seemed to be in a hurry. It felt like time moved more slowly inside that cafe. Before I could decide where to sit, a gentle voice spoke to me. "Welcome." I looked toward the counter. A woman in her early 60s smiled warmly. She wore a simple green apron, and her silver hair was tied back neatly. There was something peaceful about her smile. It wasn't the smile of someone trying to sell coffee. It was the smile of someone who truly enjoyed seeing people. "You look cold," she said, "and maybe a little lost." For the first time that day, someone had noticed how I really felt. I tried to smile. "I've had a difficult day." She nodded slowly. "You don't have to explain. Some days speak for themselves." She pointed toward a table beside the window. "Sit there. The rain always looks a little kinder from that seat." I sat down. Raindrops slowly rolled down the glass. People hurried outside with umbrellas. Cars splashed through puddles. Everything beyond the window looked gray. Everything inside the cafe felt warm. A few minutes later, the woman returned with a steaming cup of coffee. "I didn't order anything," I said. "I know," she replied gently. "This one's my gift." I looked at her, surprised. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" She smiled. "Because many years ago, someone once did the same for me." She placed the cup in front of me. Then she quietly walked back to the counter. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. It was probably the best cup of coffee I had ever tasted. But I had no idea that this small coffee shop and the woman named Emma were about to change my life forever. The next morning, I woke up later than usual. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't have to rush to work. There was no alarm, no meetings, no emails waiting for me. The silence in my apartment felt strange. I made breakfast, but I wasn't hungry. I turned on the television. Nothing interested me. I picked up a book. I couldn't focus. Then, without really thinking about it, I remembered Emma's coffee. I told myself I was only going back to return her kindness. Maybe I wanted to pay for the coffee she had given me. Maybe I just didn't want to spend another day alone. When I opened the door of the coffee shop, the little bell rang again. Emma looked up from behind the counter. She smiled, as if she had been expecting me. "I was wondering if you'd come back," she said. I laughed softly. "How did you know?" She poured fresh coffee into a cup. "People usually do." I looked around. The cafe was busier than yesterday. Some people were reading, others were talking quietly. A young man was working on his laptop. Near the window, an elderly gentleman was writing something in a notebook. Emma placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "This time," she said with a smile, "you have to pay." We both laughed. As I reached for my wallet, Emma stopped me. I wasn't talking about money. I looked at her, confused. "Then what do I have to pay?" She smiled. "Tell me your story." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Then the words came out naturally. I told her about my job, about the long hours, about losing it, about how empty I felt. Emma listened without interrupting. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look at the clock. She simply listened. When I finished, she remained silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "Sometimes life closes one door because you've been standing behind the wrong one." I looked at her. "I don't even know what I want anymore." "That's okay," she replied. "You don't have to know today." She pointed toward the elderly man by the window. "Do you see him?" I nodded. "His name is Mr. Thomas. He comes here every morning. He was a history teacher for 40 years. "What is he writing?" I asked. Emma smiled. "The book he always wanted to write." "How old is he?" 72. I couldn't hide my surprise. He started writing at 70? Emma nodded. "He says dreams don't have an expiration date." Just then, Mr. Thomas looked up and waved at me. I walked over to his table. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Emma tells me you're new." I smiled. "I guess I am." He closed his notebook. "Can I give you one piece of advice?" "Of course." He leaned forward. "Don't measure your life by the years you've worked. Measure it by the moments you've truly lived." Those words stayed with me for the rest of the day. As I walked back toward the counter, I heard soft piano music. A man in his 40s was playing an old piano in the corner. The melody was peaceful. When he finished, everyone in the cafe clapped. Emma noticed me watching. "That's David. He used to perform in big concert halls." "What happened?" "He lost confidence. For years, he stopped playing completely. Then one day, he came here. I asked him to play just one song. And now?" Emma smiled. "Now he plays every afternoon. Not because he has to, but because music makes people smile." Before leaving, I thanked Emma for everything. She handed me a small paper card. On it, she had written only one sentence. "Come back tomorrow. Someone wants to meet you." I turned the card over. There was nothing else. I looked up. Emma only smiled. "Trust me," she said. As I walked home with the card in my pocket, for the first time since losing my job, I found myself looking forward to tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. The company was waiting for my answer. A better salary, a bigger office, a new beginning. It sounded perfect. But every time I imagined accepting the job, I also imagined Emma's coffee with its lights turned off forever. The next morning, I walked to the cafe. Emma was cleaning the tables before opening. She smiled when she saw me. "You look like someone who has made a decision." I nodded. "I have." She poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from me. "I turned down the job," I said. Emma looked at me quietly. "Are you sure?" "For the first time in years, I am." She smiled. "But what will you do now?" I looked around the cafe. The books, the piano, the old wooden tables, the people who smiled at strangers. Then I looked back at Emma. "I want to help this place." She was silent. Then she laughed softly. "You know, when you first came here, you looked completely lost. And now, you found something much more valuable than a job." Just then, Mr. Thomas, David, Lily, and several regular customers walked into the cafe. Emma told them about the building. Nobody said a word for a moment. Then Mr. Thomas stood up. "This cafe has given us so much. It's our turn to give something back." Everyone agreed. During the following weeks, something amazing happened. Neighbors shared our story online. Local musicians held free concerts. Artists donated paintings. Students volunteered after school. More and more people visited Emma's Coffee. Not just for coffee, but because they wanted to keep hope alive. 3 months later, the cafe was saved. Emma hugged every single person who had helped. Then she handed me a small key. "This belongs to you too," she said. I looked at her in surprise. "Why me?" "Because one day, you came here looking for a new future, and now you've become part of ours." Today, whenever someone walks into the cafe with tired eyes and a heavy heart, I remember my first day. Sometimes I quietly place a cup of coffee on their table before they even order. When they look at me with surprise, I simply smile and say, "This one's my gift." Because I finally learned something that changed my life forever. Sometimes the place that changes your life isn't where you find success. It's where you find yourself. The end.